What is the point of an experience if someone has already gone through it before you? In times where originality has vanished, and any variation of thought or idea has been taken by something cold and empty before you could even breathe life into it. Because it's fun. Because even though someone else may have experienced it, you haven't. Even though someone or something else has created it, you haven't. If it can be replicated or replaced, the original is still yours. Today, I'm excited to show you what I'm officially most proud of. Not because it's perfect, quite the opposite really, but because I pushed myself to follow through on a vision and make something that I can be proud of. And that is this. Well, not exactly this, it's actually what's in here. And it's where this went. A Tonto-inspired knife made by me because I wanted to. Today, I'm gonna be walking you through the entire process of starting with just a piece of metal all the way to the finished product that I'm so proud of now. So to start, I took a stainless steel bar and cut out the rough shape of my blade with a grinder. Once I was happy with that, my dad and I, who was helping me here, set up a jig to angle the blade for the preferred cut of the actual edge. I believe we went with a roughly 70-degree position so that the edge would be very shallow. This makes the blade more prone to chipping, but visually more stunning. This is definitely more of a display piece than for heavy use, so I wasn't too worried about that. Sanding it down just takes patience and stability. I kept the movement left to right as rigid as possible so the edge would be consistent. But this is only the second knife I've ever made, and I wasn't gonna dwell on micro specifics here. Once I had a rough edge cut in, I was ready to put that aside and start work on the exterior for the handle and sheath. On a side note, I'm gonna be saying the word sheath a lot for the thing that will go over the blade, but technically I believe the actual name for something like this Tonto-inspired knife would be a Shitasaya? Hope I pronounced that right. But I'm just gonna keep it simple and not worry about the specifics. It's my second knife after all. Now back to the wooden exterior. To begin, I wanted to design something simple and minimal. I've always felt like a less is more kind of person, and I wanted to put that outlook into a blade. I imagined a beautiful piece of wood for the handle and sheath so that when sheathed completely, it would form a perfect seal, appearing as if it were just a single piece with nothing hidden inside, only to reveal a beautiful, polished blade when open. I started by sketching variations of the design I was after, trying to find a nice balance and symmetry. While I was working on that, I had already selected the wood for the exterior. It's called Ipe, again, I hope I pronounced that correctly, which I had never heard of before, but my dad had some lying around his shop and it was calling out to me. Ipe has a nice dark color with a beautiful grain, and its density gives it such a solid weight that adds to the high quality feel I wanted. I wanted the knife to have a premium feel, and to me, weight plays a big role in that. When I pick things up that are too light, it gives that cheap, hollow feeling like a McDonald's toy. Even modern wooden, quote unquote, furniture is often just compressed sawdust and chips, flimsy and fake. I wanted the real thing. I cut a piece of the Ipe to get the rough width for the knife exterior. Before cutting into the good wood, I practiced on a scrap piece to make sure the design would look right. Now, if there was one subject in school I absolutely despised, it was math. When I see numbers, I see red, and this was no different. I had to calculate the amount of material removed from the table saw for the exterior covering, alongside the blade's thickness and where the cut should be placed so it would be centered once the blade was laid inside. Finally, after conquering my fears, I got the calculations right, cut the wood in half, and prepped the thicker side to route the groove where the blade would go. We got it all clamped in, and my camera angles couldn't be worse. But we did it, baby. We got that gap cut out. Still practicing on my camera cinematography. That's gotta keep practicing that. I sanded down the freshly cut sides of the wood so that when glued back together, they would be completely flush. Then, in an effort to give you whiplash and derail the pacing of this project, I brought in a late 19th to early 20th century sword I bought from the swap meet to show my dad out of nowhere. And we continue on. You can see I taped off the blade. That's to prevent any damage to it while I treat it like garbage. Though I still ended up nicking it here and there, which brings me to a term my dad kept on telling me that he had heard about and likes to live by for his projects. And that term is wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi is a Japanese term, very fitting here, I must say, that centers on the acceptance of transience and imperfection. It's often described as the appreciation of beauty that is imperfect, impermanent, or incomplete. Or so says the first sentence of the Wikipedia article I just lazily copied and pasted here to describe it to you. Take that, AI. Go suck energy somewhere else, you dirty, stupid clank. So yeah, we're gonna be absolutely living and breathing this motto of wabi-sabi throughout this project. It's the only way I can cope with my obvious mistakes and follow through without collapsing into a puddle of my tears. We got the epoxy out and very carefully applied a thin layer onto the outer area of the insides of both sides of the handle. It attached well and had no issues there, but this is where we have a real wabi-sabi moment, gang. Until this moment, I didn't once think about how the sheath was going to stay tightly attached over the blade flush with the handle. Usually something called a habaki would be used to provide a nice tight fit for the sheath, but we ain't got none of that, and I wasn't about to do any of that, so I had to get clever and wing it. I thought leather could work, and I cut a very tiny strip. The hope was that when the blade goes into the sheath, the final portion that isn't sharp would apply pressure against the leather, so it would be snug and tightly held. So, viciously huffing my copium, I decided to follow through and attached the small piece of leather near the entrance of the sheath. I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was clever. You can see it also had a groove for the blade to follow and stay centered as it goes into the sheath in this little cross-section demonstration. I'm sure you can tell, but this is foreshadowing. Not wanting to think about that issue any further, I flipped the bird to my future self, told him he could deal with it, and moved on to something else in the meantime. This part was definitely out of order and genuinely such a waste of time. Like, man, what? I'm about to polish this blade. I haven't even sharpened it or removed that gross gray exterior on the rest of it, but I did it anyways. And you know what? I get it. Thinking about the sheath had me feeling like I wasn't making any progress at this point. I needed to make it at least look like I made some progress to give me a little bit of motivation back. And what better motivation than, ooh, shiny metal object. After wasting that time, I actually did get to a productive step. Sanding down that gross looking gray exterior on the rest of the blade. Let me tell you, that was not a quick task. The blade had some pretty deep dents that I really wanted gone because when I polished it later, every little imperfection would pop out. And so I put in that work, sanding and sanding. And sometimes sanding my own fingers on accident and sanding some more. Then I polished the non-sharpened part, which actually could have done something, foreshadowing again here. But whatever, the sanding part was done for now. Now we epoxy the sheath part, since I was feeling pretty confident with that leather locking idea and could close it all up. Over in my office, I epoxied the handle of the blade into the wood. Before doing so, I scratched in some pretty deep cuts on the metal where the handle is, so the epoxy would have something sturdy to harden around and keep the handle in place. The issue now was that the metal of the handle was thinner than the hole it needed to be seated in, so I straight up just grabbed a sliver of another piece of wood that was lying around, and after sloppily inserting the epoxy into the handle, I slid the blade in and then jammed the sliver in at the bottom to keep the blade straight and secure as it dried. And no, I didn't think about what I was going to do with that little sliver of wood after it dried, but have you ever heard of wabi-sabi before? Wikipedia defines it as a Japanese term that after the epoxy dried, I unwrapped the tape to see this thing finally start coming together. Seeing it go together, even in its roughest form, felt so satisfying. What started as an image in my head was genuinely becoming real, and I could not wait for the final product. In my excitement, I let my buddy Matt take it for a test ride and give some inspiring stabbing motions. Oh, yeah, baby. Oh, get him. Oh, okay. Okay, I'll use the sheath. Oh. God, that was crazy. I genuinely could not believe I was capable of creating something so amazing to me. Now, I do want to give huge credit to my dad as well. He's been teaching me how to make knives as he's been making his own. He helped me guide through a ton of these processes and helped brainstorm and troubleshoot as we went. I'm so blessed to have him as my father and to spend time with him doing something we both love. I really do get my creative drive from him. He's always been a maker his whole life. To be given even a fraction of the knowledge he's gained while doing these things with him is great. And I can't wait to do more together. Now check out these insanely cute shots of the knife so far. Ooh, yeah, baby, that's the stuff. Then things got desperate and bleak. I wanted to keep the momentum going, so I put in more time in my office on the knife and started coping even harder. Guess what? The leather thing wasn't working. The knife was loose in the sheath as the leather compressed more and more. So I had the quote unquote brilliant idea to add another piece of leather to the upper part of the sheath entrance. So I sanded it, shaved it, and tried my best to get it thin enough to provide the perfect tension as the blade goes in. And guys, I hate to say it, but I followed all the way through on this. I epoxied that bad boy in and actually just hoped it would work. But that's not all. I was still hyped to keep this thing going and finish it. So I started hand sanding the exterior. Now keep in mind, this wood is dense. So sanding it takes even longer than less denser woods. This was a mess, dude. The sawdust was piling up and I was getting nowhere. I mean it when I say I spent hours doing this, making basically no progress for what genuinely would take about 10 minutes total on my dad's belt sander. Finally, though, clarity hit me like I was a main character in an isekai and it was the truck in the first episode. I just stopped and waited until I could hit that belt sander. Now it was time to solve it once and for all. The main problem of this project had to be fixed now. I confessed my sins to my dad about what I'd done with that worthless leather piece. And we hashed out a new solution. He had a brilliant idea. Use a semi-compliant piece of plastic instead of the leather. That way, the blade could still cut a groove and follow a set path, and the plastic would compress slightly without getting mashed like the leather did. We found a piece lying around in his shop, and it was perfect. We hot glued the end to stay in place, and boom, the problem was finally solved. I couldn't believe it. It just worked. Such a simple solution for such a stubborn problem. Check out this lit perspective I've got going, by the way. Phone strapped to my chest for that beautiful first-person shot. The part where the sharpened blade stops at the base was a little too rough and was cutting up that plastic we installed, so I took a metal file and softened it a bit. Back to sanding, I finally put in the 10 or so minutes and sanded this puppy down. So much faster and more efficient with the belt sander. The belt got too worn down and made me do a little diaper change swap, but I replaced it, got right back to sanding. The new belt was a finer grit, so the wood really started coming together and gaining a smoother surface. I also didn't want the edges of the wood to be so sharp, both for the feel and because it looked a bit harsh, and I was going for a more premium appearance. So I chamfered it, and I personally think that did the trick. The other option was to round the edges, but this design was focused on a polished sharpness. Harder corners on both the wood and the blade. Finally, I hand sanded the wood all around with a much higher 1000 to 2000 grit sandpaper to give it just a little softening for feel. And here we are, the moment where I do the most hand sanding of all. It was time to actually sharpen the blade. We had a rough sanding to the shape of it, but now I needed this thing finalized. So I spent hours slowly sharpening it on dry sandpaper. If you know anything about sharpening a blade, you'll know this is not ideal. You won't get the blade to peak sharpness. It isn't the best technique and absolutely blows through sandpaper. But again, this piece is mostly for looks and we didn't have a whetstone. I could have at least wet the sandpaper, but have I ever told you about something called wabi-sabi? So I sanded a lot. I hit both the actual edge and the spine, which pretty much negated all of the polishing I did earlier and taught me a lesson. But at the end of the day, it came out looking pretty good. The sharpening took even longer because I made a massive mistake at the very beginning of this project. I didn't get footage of it, but when I first cut out the blade shape from the steel bar with the grinder, I didn't properly let the steel cool down as I was grinding, and the steel very slightly bent from the heat building up as I chipped away on the steel. When sanding, you really want the blade to be as perfectly straight as possible, or the tiny bends will make you miss spots and oversand other ones. I also needed to deal with my wabi-sabi decision of that light colored sliver, as well as the gaps where the handle was seated into the wood with epoxy. I decided the sliver didn't actually look too bad, and then I took some sawdust from the same type of wood and packed it into the gaps where the epoxy was showing, and put mineral oil on top of it, as well as all over the rest of the knife to give it a final seal. Though before I did make that decision, I decided I wanted to experiment with some different stains and try those out. But then as I was trying to open one of the stains, well, as you can see here, it didn't work out well.
Oh God, I'm gonna need more.
So after that happened, I completely put all the other stains to the side and decided mineral oil just feels right for some reason, you know? And now, after months of work, 20 plus total hours, go easy on me, I'm a beginner, we have the final product, a Tonto-inspired knife made by my own two hands. I also super last second made a protective case with some leather my dad had in his shop. We quickly made a design, cut it out, bent the leather, and made a little tie to secure it. This is mostly to keep it safe so I can store it and not beat it up, but I thought I'd show you. There's so much more I could have talked about, more specific decisions, mess ups, etc. But honestly, I think I'll leave it here. For my second ever knife, I am beyond happy with it. And for anyone wanting to see the first knife, by the way, here it is. I just wanted to make a nice, simple one, nothing too fancy. Just learning the basics, and I also gave a crack at making a leather sheath. Came out a bit rough, but I dyed it black and hid as many imperfections as possible. Anyway, with this Tonto, I learned a lot. Like, not making big mistakes early on so they don't compound into hours and hours of extra work, but also to persevere, to have faith and believe in myself, and to have the strength to figure it out and follow through. I don't doubt many people have made a Tonto-styled knife like this, and probably way better. But I made this one with my mind, my hands, and well, with my dad. I got to experience this. I got to generate this. I got to imagine this. Something I can sometimes forget to be grateful for. My mind, my heart, and my soul. Thank you for watching. Thank you to all the people who support me just by viewing, commenting, and engaging. And also to those who support me financially. You provide me a stability that is dwindling more and more on the internet. So thank you to everyone on screen that's passing by. If you're interested in supporting me as well, you can join my fourth wall over at sabre.plus. It's literally just like a Patreon with benefits like discounted merch and more. So check that out if you're interested. I know this was a bit of a change up in content, but you guys said you wanted to see me do something I'm passionate about. Here you go. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.